The sharp, continuous beep of the heart monitor was the soundtrack to my death. Lying on the sterile hospital bed, my body was a failed machine, riddled with tubes and a weariness that had sunk into my bones over 50 long years. The man in the bed next to mine, the man I had called my husband for half a century, was the one who had finally pulled the plug on my will to live. "Elara," he rasped, his voice a dry leaf scraping against stone. His wrinkled, liver-spotted hand, surprisingly strong in its desperation, gripped my frail arm. "The thing I regret most in this life is marrying a selfish woman like you." The words didn't just hurt, they eviscerated me. 50 years. 50 years of standing by Kalen Vance, of eating bitterness and wearing rags so he could build his empire. I had loved him when he was a penniless, arrogant youth from the countryside, a Phoenix man, who everyone said would never amount to anything. I had defied my family, sacrificed my comfort, and poured every ounce of my being into lifting him up. And this was my reward on his deathbed? A final, venomous condemnation. "Sienna waited for me for 50 years, Kalen sobbed, suddenly sounding like a petulant child. "My son never knew a father's love. I'm leaving everything to them." A hollow, rattling laugh escaped my throat. Sienna. His precious white rose, his unattainable moonlight. While I was working myself to the bone, he had been pining for her. And now he wanted to hand over the Vance conglomerate, the hundreds of billions we had built together, to that woman and the son he'd had with her. I tried to gather my breath, to curse him, to tell him that without me, he would have died a nameless beggar. But the darkness was closing in, a heavy velvet curtain descending. A tearing pain exploded in my chest. The frantic beeping of the monitor became a single high-pitched shriek. Through blurring vision I saw him. Kalen was standing in the corner of the room, away from the flurry of doctors and nurses rushing to my side. And on his face as my life faded, was not grief but a look of profound relief. A ghost of a smile tugged at his lips. That monster. He was glad I was dying. As my consciousness unraveled, I made a vow to any god or demon that might be listening. If I am given another chance, I will never ever degrade myself by loving that cold-blooded man again. "Elara. Elara, wake up." A violent shaking snapped me back to existence. Blinding sunlight streamed through a window, hitting my face. I instinctively raised a hand to block it and froze. My hand was fair, soft, and delicate. The skin was smooth, not a single age spot or prominent vein in sight. "What are you spacing out for?" A face shoved itself into my line of sight. It was my friend Cora. "Didn't you say you were going to register your marriage with Kalen today? Do you even know what time it is?" "Register our marriage?" I bolted up from the narrow bed as if electrocuted. My eyes darted around the small, sparse room of the youth outpost. This was my room from 50 years ago. I scrambled for the calendar on the wooden desk. June 18, 1985. The day my first life had truly ended. "Where's Kalen?" I asked, my voice trembling not with fear, but with a dawning, ferocious hope. Cora pouted. "He left early this morning. Said Sienna had a stomach ache, so he took her to the town clinic. He ran into me and told me to let you know, you'll go register another day." The memory, sharp and cold, stabbed through me. It was exactly the same. In my past life, I had made excuses for him, believing his care for his best friend's widow was a sign of his noble character. What a blind, pathetic fool I had been. "Don't overthink it, Elara," Cora said, her voice hesitant. "Kalen said Sienna's husband just died and she's pregnant. It's not easy for her." A cold laugh escaped my lips, startling both of us. "I'm not overthinking anything." I swung my legs out of bed and began packing my small suitcase with a methodical calm I didn't know I possessed. In my last life I had swallowed my pride and waited. I had married him without a dowry, without my family's blessing, and embarked on a life of hardship. And for what? A betrayal that spanned decades and ended with me being discarded like garbage. Not this time. Once my suitcase was packed, I walked straight to the village post office, my heart hammering against my ribs. With trembling fingers, I dialed the number I had regretted not dialing for 3 years in my previous life. "Hello." My mother's voice, familiar and dear, came through the crackling line. Tears welled up instantly, clogging my throat. "Mom, it's me. Elara. Sweetheart, is everything all right?" "Mom," I said, the words tumbling out. "I've thought it through. I'm willing to marry Julian Thorne." There was a stunned silence on the other end, followed by a loud clatter as if the phone had been dropped. A moment later, my father's voice, deep and trembling, came on the line. "Elara, did that Kalen Vance bully you?" I bit down hard on my lip, the pain grounding me. No, Dad. I see things clearly now. Julian has always been good to me. I want to marry him. The relief on the other end of the line was palpable. Come home, baby, Dad said, his voice thick with emotion. Come home right now. After I hung up, I squatted outside the post office and cried, great heaving sobs that cleansed me of 50 years of bitterness. Julian Thorne, the boy next door who had watched me with quiet, steady eyes our entire childhood. I had rejected him for Kaylin's fiery, selfish passion. In my first life, even after I'd married Kaylin, Julian had been a quiet presence in the background, helping us in secret when we faced trouble, fighting for my children's rights after Kaylin's betrayal. He had even given me a resting place in the Thorne family tomb when I died alone and forsaken. Julian, I thought, wiping my tears with the back of my hand. In this life I will come to you with dignity. And when the time comes I will lie beside you for eternity. I stood up, brushed the dust from my pants and headed toward the supply station to buy a few things before my journey home. But as I approached I heard voices that made my blood run cold. Kaylin and Sienna. I hid behind the wall, my new life hanging in the balance. Sienna, just give me 3 months. Kaylin's voice was dripping with a false gentleness that made me nauseous. Alara's parents will give her a generous dowry. Once I get the money I'll quit this job and take you to Crestfall City. Kaylin, Sienna sobbed. You're marrying a woman you don't love just for me? I've already lost you once. I won't let go again. The truth hit me like a physical blow. He was reborn. That was why he was so brazen. He wasn't just repeating history, he was executing a plan. He knew about the dowry. He was going to use me just like before to fund his life with his beloved Sienna. A cold, hard smile spread across my face. Too bad for you, Kaylin Vance. In this life, Alara Reed is no one's pawn. I walked back to the youth outpost, my mind racing. Kaylin was reborn. This changed everything and yet nothing. It meant his actions were even more calculated, his betrayal premeditated from the very start. But it also gave me an advantage. I knew exactly what he wanted and I could use that against him. I was sitting on the edge of my wooden bed, my fingers absently picking at a loose thread on the rough sheet, when the door burst open. Kaylin stormed in, a sheen of sweat on his forehead, his face a mask of fabricated panic. Alara. Something terrible has happened. He rushed to grab my hands but I subtly shifted, making him grasp air. He didn't seem to notice in his feigned distress. It's Sienna. She's having pregnancy complications. The doctor says she needs to be transferred to the city hospital to save the baby. I stared at him, my face a blank slate. In my previous life, this performance would have sent me into a spiral of worry. Now I saw it for what it was, the opening act of a familiar play. Her family is dirt poor, Kaylin continued, wringing his hands, his eyes darting repeatedly to the drawer where I used to keep my savings. There's no way they can afford it. I was thinking, maybe we could use the money meant for our wedding banquet to help cover the emergency. Sure, I replied, my voice flat and immediate. Kaylin was stunned into silence. The rehearsed speech about compassion and duty died on his lips. He eyed me with suspicion. You really agree? I tilted my head, putting on the wide-eyed naive expression I had mastered in my youth. Of course. Isn't it important? He let out a breath he'd been holding, a forced smile stretching his lips. Alara, you're so kind. Rose doesn't have anyone, so I'll have to stay with her at the hospital for the next few days. No problem. I nodded again, the cold laughter inside me growing louder. In my past life, we'd had a screaming match over this. Now I was practically pushing him out the door. His eyebrows furrowed in confusion. This wasn't following his script. He hesitated, then launched into his justification. Alara, don't overthink it. Sienna is the widow of my best friend. Who else is going to help her if not me? Of course you should help, I said with what I hoped sounded like sincere empathy. Did I stop you? He was completely thrown. His face cycled through confusion, frustration, and then a sudden calculating gleam. Oh right. Didn't your mom say she'd give you 2,000 yuan as a dowry? The hospital costs are high. Why don't you give me the money now? I'll handle everything. There was the real goal. I lowered my head, pretending to fuss with my already packed luggage. I don't have any money. What do you mean, no money? Panic, real this time, flashed in his eyes. He yanked open the drawer, rummaging through it frantically. You said just 2 days ago your mom was borrowing it. My dad doesn't agree with the marriage, I said calmly, watching his frantic movements with detached satisfaction. He stopped my mom from borrowing the money. Kaylin froze as if struck by lightning. Then, what about the dowry? I bit my lip, feigning shame. The dowry is gone too. The transformation was instantaneous. The mask of concerned benevolence shattered, revealing the petulant, selfish man beneath. No money, no dowry, he snarled, kicking over a nearby stool. Then what the hell are we even getting married for? I nearly did laugh then. There were his true colors on display after just a few minutes of resistance. Then let's not get married, I said, my voice flat and final. Kaylin Vance, we're done. It was like I'd flipped a switch. His face went slack with shock. His lips trembled as he tried to process this deviation from his plan. Just as quickly he tried to backtrack, his tone softening into a wheedling plea. Alara, are you mad? Look, I won't go to the hospital. Just give me 200 yuan. I'll buy a couple of hens to help Sienna recover. I cut him off coldly. You're rushing to wait on her like that. Someone who didn't know better might think the baby she's carrying is yours. His face flushed a deep, ugly red. How dare you? Sienna is miserable enough. Are you trying to drive her to her death? I'd had enough. I stood and grabbed my suitcase. Think what you want. You and Sienna can do whatever you like from now on. The wedding's off. I'm going home. Panic truly set in then. He grabbed my arm, his grip tight. Alara Reed, what do you mean? I was just feeling sorry for her. Can't you be a little more understanding? Just then a soft, pitiful voice came from the doorway. Kaylin. There stood Sienna, clutching her noticeably swollen belly. She was wearing a faded blue shirt, her face pale and tears already welling in her large eyes. It was a masterpiece of calculated vulnerability. This is all my fault, she whispered. I felt a wave of revulsion. This was the act that had fooled me for a lifetime. Kaylin, don't fight with Alara, she said, twisting the hem of her shirt. I won't go to the hospital. I'll just stay home. She swayed dramatically, grabbing the doorframe for support. The doctor said I'm anemic. I need injections and tonic supplements. Kaylin rushed to her side, then turned to bark at me. Give me the money. I watched their duet unmoved. Sienna, seeing my lack of reaction, piled it on. And then there's the cost of delivery and the baby's 1-month celebration. I added it up. It'll be at least 2,000. I almost snorted. The audacity. I'd given birth for less than 50 yuan. I'm not like you, Alara, Sienna cried, her tears falling on cue. Your parents are officials. All I brought to my marriage was 2 quilts. She looked at Kaylin with pathetic eyes. Didn't you say Alara's mom was giving her 2,000? Can't we just treat it like we're family? Kaylin jumped on it, turning to me with righteous authority. Once you marry me, she'll be your sister-in-law. It's your duty to take care of her. I looked at them, these 2 puppets in a play I was no longer watching. I decided to give them just enough rope. About the money, I dragged the words out, watching their eyes light up with hope. My mom said she has to wait until my dad cools down. It'll take at least another week. I saw the quick, excited glance they exchanged. They thought they had won. Alara, you're the best. Kaylin's tone changed in an instant. He threw an arm around my shoulders with fake affection. Then there's no rush. I'll borrow from folks in the village for now. You can pay them back when your mom wires the money. I lowered my head to hide my smile. Sure. Satisfied, they left. Through the window, I saw her glance back at me, a smug, triumphant smirk on her face. Idiot, it seemed to say. Your man is mine. Little did she know the trap had just been set. And they had walked right into it. The next few days were a study in quiet observation. I stayed at the outpost, a ghost in my own former life, while Kaylin played his part with gusto. Just as I expected, he began making the rounds through the village, his story polished and ready. I was sitting in the dusty courtyard, soaking in a sun that felt new and forgiving, when a group of aunties, the village's chief news distributors, ambled over. Their faces were masks of false concern. Alara, is it true? One began, her voice dripping with feigned sympathy. Kaylin said you asked him to borrow money for the wedding? Such a shame having to start a marriage in debt. I didn't rise to the bait. Instead, I pointed a casual finger towards the newly built brick house at the edge of the village. Auntie, is Sienna still unwell? It's a pity. Her family just built that new 3-room house. Must be worth a few thousand at least. It's a shame she can't sell it in her condition. The change in their expressions was immediate. The gleam of gossip was replaced by the hard glint of financial interest. They exchanged glances, their minds undoubtedly calculating the value of bricks and mortar versus Kaylin's empty promises. They mumbled excuses and hurried away, their mission shifting from gathering gossip to securing their loans. By evening, Kaylin had miraculously scraped together 2,000 yuan. The efficiency of village creditors when collateral is suspected was truly impressive. Not long after, Sienna came bouncing over. Her earlier weakness vanished. She held up a box of cheap low-grade gelatin. "Look, Ilara," she said, her voice sickly sweet. "This is what Kaylin bought me to nourish my body. Thank you for the money." I looked at the gelatin and a memory surfaced, sharp and bitter. Me, pregnant in a drafty rental, saving for weeks to buy a single stick of brown sugar. The contrast was so stark it was almost funny. "If you're going to thank someone, thank Kaylin," I said, pitching my voice to carry to the neighbors who were pretending to tend their gardens. "He's the one who went door to door borrowing all that money for you." The effect was electric. The aunties who had just loaned him money froze. Their faces darkened. A grown man, borrowing heavily to buy supplements for another man's pregnant wife? The whispers started instantly. Kaylin's face purpled. He grabbed my arm and pulled me aside. "What the hell are you doing?" he hissed. I widened my eyes, the picture of innocence. "Did I say something wrong? You did borrow the money, didn't you?" He was speechless, trapped by his own narrative. He could only stomp away in a fury, Sienna scurrying after him. I smiled. The first act was over. The main performance was about to begin. The day we were supposed to register arrived. I rose early and dressed with deliberate plainness, choosing a dark blue work jacket I'd hated in my first life. I wanted to remember the feeling of being an afterthought. "Ilara, you're really going?" Cora mumbled from her bed, half asleep. I dusted my face with talcum powder, looking at my reflection. The youthful face staring back held a cold determination I hadn't possessed before. "Of course I'm going. I have an appointment to keep." Just as I finished, Kaylin's voice called from outside. "Ilara, you ready?" I walked out, my cloth bag in hand, and nearly laughed aloud. There he was, and next to him stood Sienna. She was wearing a bright red jacket, her face flushed with excitement. She looked like the bride. I looked like her impoverished maid. "What's this?" I asked, my gaze dropping pointedly to her belly. "Bringing the baby to our marriage registration?" Kaylin had the decency to look briefly ashamed, but he puffed out his chest. "Sienna never had a proper wedding photo. Since I'm getting mine taken today, I figured I'd take one with her, to make up for what my friend never got to do." The sheer audacity took my breath away. The villagers who had gathered to watch the spectacle began to murmur loudly. I let out a cold laugh. "Why don't you two just make it official then? You're both dressed for the occasion. Might as well go in and register together." Kaylin's face turned crimson. "Ilara, Reed, what's that supposed to mean?" "It means," I said, crossing my arms, "that you and I aren't even married and you're already planning to spend my hypothetical dowry on your best friend's widow. Why don't you just marry her? Then you can take care of her openly for the rest of your life." He was shaking with rage. On cue, Sienna covered her face and started to weep. "Ilara, I'm sorry. I just envy you so much for getting to marry a man like Kaylin. If you're upset, I'll go home right now." "Don't go, Sienna." Kaylin grabbed her arm, then turned and shouted at me. "I'm a man of my word. If you can't accept this, then you're not worthy of being my wife." The words that had once crushed me now felt like a liberation. I burst out laughing. "Fine. Then I'm not worthy. Kaylin Vance, we're done." "Fine," he shot back, his neck corded with anger. "But let me be clear. My best friend is gone and Sienna and that child are my responsibility for life. If you can accept that, we register now. If not, then get the hell out." The crowd erupted. "The way he says that, you'd think the baby was his," someone yelled. "Then we're done," I said, my voice calm and clear. "I'm heading back to the city today. I won't get in the way of your little wedding shoot." I turned to leave. But Kaylin, realizing the financial implications, panicked. He grabbed my bag. "Wait. What about the money I borrowed? If you leave, what do I do about the debt?" The crowd went silent. This was the moment. I let out a cold laugh, reached into my bag and pulled out the stack of ayus I'd collected from the gossiping aunties. I slapped them right into his face. "You borrowed it. You pay it back." The papers fluttered to the ground like accusing leaves. Kaylin scrambled to pick them up, his face deathly pale. "You didn't sign any of these," he cried desperately. "And why would I?" I raised my voice, addressing the entire village. "Kaylin Vance and Sienna borrowed that money. What does any of it have to do with me, Ilara Reed?" Chaos erupted. The lenders swarmed Kaylin and Sienna. "Oh, so it wasn't Ilara? Then who pays us back? Sienna has that new brick house." Sienna's face turned green. That money was borrowed by Kalen. What's it got to do with me? Kalen completely lost it. He jabbed a finger in her face. I didn't use a single cent on myself. I spent it all on you. And now you want to wash your hands of it. The scene devolved into a screaming, shoving match. I watched coldly as the mob dragged them toward the police station, their perfect duet finally falling apart into a screeching cacophony of blame. I wheeled my bicycle out, ready to leave it all behind. But Sienna broke free and stood before me, her tears gone, her eyes gleaming with pure venom. You think you've won, she hissed. His heart belongs to me. He'll come crawling back. I didn't bother with a reply. I got on my bicycle and pedaled away, never looking back. The strings were cut. The puppets were destroying themselves. My new life was waiting. The police were admirably efficient. That afternoon, an officer came to the outpost to question me. He was a young man with a troubled expression. Comrade Alara Reed, Kalen Vance claims you instructed him to borrow the money. I handed him my household registration booklet and my certificate of single status. My hands were steady. Officer, I never registered a marriage with Kalen. There is no legal relationship between us. And as you can see, I gestured to the IOUs he held, none of those bear my signature. Why should I be responsible for a debt between two other people? He flipped through the documents, nodded and handed them back. You're right. This debt has nothing to do with you. As I walked out of the small station, the sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. Felt like a benediction. From the mediation room, I could hear the sounds of Kalen and Sienna's unraveling continuing, curses, accusations and desperate pleas. It was the sound of my past life burning to ash. The next morning I carried my luggage to the town's train station. The platform was quiet, the air fresh with the promise of a new day. I bought a ticket to the provincial capital and sat on a wooden bench, the weight of the last 5 years finally lifting from my shoulders. The train's whistle grew louder, a long, mournful sound that felt like a farewell. As I stood to board, a heart-wrenching cry echoed through the station. Alara! Wait! Kalen came stumbling onto the platform, filthy and disheveled. His clothes were wrinkled, his face scratched. He looked like a stray dog. Alara, I was wrong, he waved frantically, his voice choked with sobs. I swear I'll never care about Sienna again. Please come back. I stared at him, this man who had been a titan in my previous life, now reduced to a pathetic figure chasing a train. The irony was so thick I could taste it. Alara, I never got married. I've been waiting for you, he cried as the train began to move. I leaned my head out the window, the wind whipping my hair. Save your breath, Kalen. Sienna is still waiting for you at the police station. His figure shrank into the distance, a small dark speck swallowed by the morning mist. I leaned back in my seat and let out a long, slow breath. It was over. Truly over. The train clattered into the provincial capital hours later. The noise, the crowds, the smell of the city, it was overwhelming and wonderful. After 5 years I was home. I stepped onto the platform, my heart pounding with a nervous excitement. And then I heard it. Alara. There was my mother standing at the front of the crowd, waving her arms. She wore the navy blue blouse with the little embroidered sparrows that I remembered so well. And just behind her my father, his face stern and unyielding, but his eyes suspiciously bright. Mom. Dad. I dropped my suitcase and ran into her arms. She hugged me tightly, then gave me a sharp slap on the back. You foolish girl. You finally remembered you have a home. But even as she scolded me, her arms tightened around me, and I breathed in the familiar, comforting scent of soap on her clothes. I burst into tears, the last of my defenses crumbling. My father walked over. He didn't say a word. He just placed a rough, calloused hand on my head and rubbed it hard, his fingers trembling. I'm sorry, I choked out, my face buried in my mother's shoulder. I'm so sorry. It's okay, my father said, his voice cracked and dry. You're home now. He cleared his throat. The Thorne family has everything arranged. They're coming for lunch tomorrow. I was stunned. That soon? Soon. My mother pulled back, her eyes wide. You're already 23. If it weren't for... She cut herself off, sighing. That boy Julian waited for you all these years. How much longer do you expect him to wait? Julian waited for me? The thought sent a strange, warm flutter through my chest. The next morning, I was in the kitchen helping my mother chop vegetables when the doorbell rang. My heart leapt into my throat. Go answer it, my mom said, nudging me with her elbow. It's probably the Thornes. I smoothed down my simple dress, took a deep breath and opened the door. And there he was. Julian Thorne stood on our doorstep, dressed in a crisp white shirt, holding 2 boxes of pastries. The morning sun streamed in from behind him, casting a golden halo around his tall, broad-shouldered frame. He was even more handsome than I remembered, his face kind, his eyes, a warm, steady brown, crinkling at the corners as he smiled. "Elara," he said, his voice deeper than it used to be. I stood frozen, my breath caught in my chest. 5 years had turned the quiet boy next door into this solid, dependable man. "What's wrong?" he asked, a gentle amusement in his tone. He bent down slightly so our eyes were level. "You weren't this shy when you used to chase after me, calling me Jules, when we were kids." A blush heated my cheeks. Memories flooded back. Him carrying me home after I scraped my knee, him standing up to bullies for me, him secretly slipping me a stack of precious food stamps before I left for the countryside. "Julian," I said softly. His gaze softened instantly. He raised a hand as if to pat my head, then seemed to think better of it and instead took the basket of vegetables from my hands. "Let me help." Lunch was a warm, bustling affair. Our parents chatted enthusiastically, my father and Mr. Thorne reminiscing, my mother and Mrs. Thorne already deep into discussions about wedding details. Julian and I sat quietly beside each other, the calm center of the happy storm. "Elara," Mrs. Thorne said, turning to me suddenly. "Did Julian tell you about what happened up north?" "Mom," Julian cut her off gently. "Let's talk about that later." I looked at him, curious, but he just smiled and placed another piece of stewed chicken in my bowl. "More. You've lost weight." After the meal, our parents moved to the living room. Julian offered to help me wash the dishes. The kitchen was filled with the sound of running water and a comfortable silence. Then he spoke, his voice low. "Kaylin Vance." My hand jerked and the plate I was holding nearly slipped away. "I won't ask," he said, his voice gentle but firm. He took the wet plate from me and began drying it with a cloth. "You just need to know this. From now on, I'm here." I looked up and met his gaze. The certainty in his eyes was absolute. It wasn't a question or a plea. It was a statement of fact, a vow. In that moment I understood why, in my past life, he had always been my silent guardian. His love wasn't a raging fire. It was the steady, enduring warmth of the sun. And for the first time in 2 lifetimes I felt truly, completely safe. A month later, Julian and I were married at the Thorne family's ancestral home. When the car pulled up to the intricately carved redwood gates, my breath caught in my throat. In my first life, I had heard whispers of the Thorne family's wealth, but I had been too blinded by Kaylin's grandiose dreams to pay them any mind. This wasn't just a house. It was a serene, sprawling compound. Elegant rock gardens surrounded a tranquil koi pond, and graceful pavilions were connected by covered walkways. It spoke of generations of quiet, dignified prosperity, a world away from the garish, newly built mansion Kaylin would eventually flaunt. "Do you like it?" Julian whispered, his hand finding mine as he helped me out of the car. "It's peaceful," I managed, my voice full of wonder. He smiled, a soft, private thing meant only for me. "It's your home now." During the simple but heartfelt ceremony, my father walked me down the aisle. As he placed my hand in Julian's, he leaned close. "Sweetheart, the Thorne family has transferred the deed to the lakeside villa into your name. And your mother and I..." His voice caught. "We've seen to your dowry." Later I discovered what that meant. They had given me half of their life savings, 10,000 yuan. A staggering sum. In my first life I had thrown their love back in their faces for a man who valued me only for what I could give him. In this life, their unconditional support washed over me, healing a wound I had carried for decades. When we exchanged rings, Julian's hands were trembling. He slipped a beautiful, tasteful diamond ring onto my finger with the care of someone handling a fragile treasure. "I've waited so long for this day," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. That evening, as I moved through the guests, my simple red cheongsam feeling more luxurious than any gown I'd ever owned, I caught my reflection in a gilded mirror. The woman staring back was radiant, her eyes clear and full of quiet confidence. She was nothing like the harried, bitter ghost I had become in my previous marriage. On the 3rd day I was in the study sorting through the list of gifts in my dowry. Julian walked in with a glass of warm milk. "What are you looking at so seriously?" he asked, handing it to me. I pointed to the numbers on the list. "My parents gave me 10,000 yuan. I was thinking of investing it." Julian raised an eyebrow, not in skepticism but in interest. "Oh." I took a deep breath. This was the moment. Now that the economy is opening up, home appliances are the future. I heard when I was in the countryside that if you ship a television set from the south to the north, you can double your profit. Julian leaned against the desk, folding his arms. You want to go into sales? Not just sales, I said, my excitement growing. I grabbed his hand. We could import a production line. Make our own televisions. I read in the newspaper that foreign companies already have color TVs. Julian's eyes, those warm, intelligent eyes, lit up with a spark I hadn't seen before. You've been doing your homework. I paid attention, I said quickly, a half-truth. I didn't say that this was the exact blueprint of Kalen's first life empire. This time I would build it first, and I would build it right on a foundation of respect, not exploitation. Julian was silent for a moment, thinking. Then a slow, decisive smile spread across his face. Let's do it. The family owns several storefronts in the city center. We can convert the largest one into our first appliance store. I was stunned. I had expected discussion, debate. I hadn't expected this immediate, unwavering faith. You believe me? Just like that. He reached out and gently pinched my cheek, his expression turning serious. Elara, from now on, I'm putting everything on you. Tears pricked my eyes. In my past life, I had fought Kalen for every shred of respect, for every minor business decision. Julian's trust was a gift so profound it left me speechless. I simply nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Just as we began drawing up plans, a letter arrived from my old friend Cora in Xinghua town. Julian looked up from the accounting book he was studying. Who's it from? I opened it, my eyes scanning the familiar handwriting. Then a cold laugh escaped me. Sienna, I said. She had a traumatic delivery. Cora wrote that Sienna, having overindulged in the tonics Kalen bought with his borrowed money, had given birth to a child with cerebral palsy. In the process, her uterus had to be removed. The final sentence was a piece of grim satisfaction. Kalen took one look at the sickly baby and refused to register the marriage. Serves them right, I thought, the words cold and final in my mind. I crumpled the letter and tossed it into the wastebasket. Julian walked over and wrapped his arms around me from behind, his chin resting on my shoulder. Don't waste your energy on people who don't matter, he murmured. Tomorrow the first batch of televisions arrives. You need to check them personally. Leaning back into his solid chest, the contrast was dizzying. At this point in my last life, Kalen was drowning in debt and Rose was a constant nagging presence at our door. Now Kalen was truly drowning and I was standing in a sunlit study, married to a man who cherished me, about to launch the business that would define our future. Julian, I said, turning in his arms to face him. We're going to become the top appliance retailer in the country, right? He lowered his head and kissed my forehead. Not retailer, my love. Mogul. You'll be the queen of home appliances. You conquer the outside world. I'll make sure our home is your fortress. I laughed, the sound light and free, and all the shadows of the past were swept away. My brilliant new life had truly begun. 2 years flew by in a whirlwind of activity and happiness. I stood in the second-floor office of Thorn Appliances Emporium, looking down through the floor-to-ceiling window at the busiest commercial street in Crestfall City. The scene below was one of organized chaos. A line of customers snaked down the sidewalk, all eager to get their hands on one of our televisions or newly stocked refrigerators. Our single store had blossomed into a chain of 18, stretching from north to south. The name Thorn had become synonymous with quality and reliability. President Elara, this is last month's financial report. My assistant, a sharp and efficient young woman named May, handed me a file with respectful deference. I flipped it open and a genuine smile touched my lips. A net profit of 500,000 yuan. In the mid-1980s, it was an astronomical figure, a testament to how perfectly we had timed our venture. How is the new production line coming along? I asked, my eyes still scanning the impressive numbers. Mr. Thorne is overseeing the installation himself, May replied with a grin. He said trial production should start next week. The foreman says he's never seen a business owner who knows so much about wiring. He's there with the engineers, getting his hands dirty. A warm flush spread across my cheeks. I lowered my head to hide my smile. Over the past 2 years, Julian had been my unwavering partner. When I proposed the business, he provided the capital without a second thought. When I suggested importing a production line, he used his network of overseas classmates to make it happen. And his support wasn't just financial, it was deeply personal. I remembered with a pang of tenderness when I was pregnant and casually mentioned craving a specific type of plum, he had driven overnight to a neighboring province to find it for me. The phone on my desk rang, shrill and insistent. Thorn Appliances, Ilara speaking. Ilara. Julian's voice came through the receiver, slightly muffled by the clanging of machinery in the background. The line is ahead of schedule. It's a bit complex though. I might be here all night. Don't wait up, okay? Get some rest. I frowned, my hand instinctively going to my very round belly. No way. I'm coming over. You shouldn't have to do that alone. Absolutely not, he said, his voice firm with alarm. Ilara, you're carrying 3 babies. I won't have you near all this machinery and stress. Promise me you'll go straight home. I sighed, rubbing the swell where our children, triplets the doctor had confirmed last month, were kicking vigorously. Julian's excitement at the news had been a sight to behold. He had practically floated out of the hospital. But don't you stay up too late either. After I hung up, I was gathering my things when May knocked and entered again. President Ilara, the principal from Xinghua Town Elementary, is here. It's about the charity donation we discussed. I had almost forgotten. I'd promised to donate a batch of televisions and tape recorders to the rural school. Seeing that it was still early, I nodded. Please send him in. The principal was a kind, elderly man who began effusively thanking me the moment he stepped through the door. President Ilara, thank you so much. Your generosity will make a world of difference to our students. It's the least we can do, I said with a genuine smile. We succeed because of the support of people from all walks of life. Just as I was speaking, a loud commotion erupted from the street below. I turned toward the window. Across the road, in front of a shabby, grease-stained repair shop, a man and a woman were locked in a violent struggle. You stupid woman. Can't even watch a damn child properly, the man roared, slapping the woman hard across the face. She was holding a listless child in her arms and she staggered back but didn't retreat. Instead, she lunged at him, her fingers clawing at his face. Kaylin Vance, you heartless bastard, she screamed, her voice piercing the afternoon air. I sold my house for you, I ruined my body for you, and now you think I'm in your way? My whole body went cold. The teacup I was holding slipped from my fingers and shattered on the floor. President Ilara, are you all right? The principal asked, concerned. I'm fine, I stammered, my eyes glued to the scene outside. The tea was just too hot. But I wasn't fine. The greasy, wild-haired man in the stained overalls was Kaylin Vance. The ragged, bloated woman with the matted hair and feral eyes was Sienna. The once proud future king of Crestfall City was now a 2-bit TV repairman, and his delicate white rose was a shrieking harpy. Keep dreaming, you delusional fool. Sienna shrieked. She's Mrs. Thorne now, the queen of Crestfall, and you're nothing. Kaylin snapped. He grabbed her by the collar, his hand clamping around her neck. Shut your mouth. If it weren't for your cursed jinxed self, I would be the richest man in this city by now. Bystanders started yelling. Someone call the police. He's going to kill her. I watched, my heart a block of ice in my chest. The man and woman who had haunted my first life, who had driven me to an early grave, were now living a hell of their own making, worse than any I could have devised. President Ilara, should we call the police? May asked nervously. I shook my head, finally tearing my gaze away. No. It's not our concern. Let's go. We had just reached the office door when a desperate, raw scream echoed from the street. Ilara. I turned. Kaylin was gripping the railing across the street, waving madly at me, his face a mess of fresh scratches. You're back. I knew you wouldn't forget me, he cried, sobbing. I never married her. I've been waiting for you. I'll kick her out right now. We can start over. I stared at him, this raving lunatic, this ghost from my past. Before I could form a response, a familiar, solid presence was behind me. Julian's arms came around me, pulling me protectively against his chest. His gaze was sharp and cold as it fixed on Kaylin. Where did this lunatic come from? Julian's voice was calm but carried an undeniable authority. Kaylin's face twisted with hatred when he saw Julian. You stole her from me. Julian ignored him, turning to May. Check with this man's family. See if he needs to be taken to a psychiatric hospital. Put the expenses on my personal account. The dismissal, so calm and final, was more devastating than any insult. Kaylin stumbled back, mumbling incoherently. No. I'm not crazy. She's my wife. I didn't look back. I let Julian guide me into the waiting car. As the door closed, I could still hear Kaylin's howls of despair echoing down the street. "You okay?" Julian asked softly, his hand coming to rest on my belly. I leaned my head against his shoulder, the tension draining from my body. "I'm fine," I whispered. "Just a little tired." "Take us home," Julian instructed the driver. Then he leaned down and kissed my forehead. "I'm not going back to the factory tonight. I'm staying with you." Outside, the city's neon lights began to flicker on. I rested a hand on my round belly, feeling the powerful kicks of our 3 children. The pain and injustice of my past life felt like a distant, fading nightmare. I had finally woken up. The sun beat down hot on the asphalt, but inside my air-conditioned top-floor office at the newly renamed Thorn Group, it was serene. I was reviewing a proposal for a summer camp we were sponsoring for underprivileged students. My belly was now so large with the triplets that moving was a chore, and Julian had become my shadow, his anxiety a constant, endearing presence. "President Alara, here is the finalized participant list," May said, handing me a folder. "Just as you requested, we added more spots for students from Xinghua Town Elementary." I nodded, scanning the names. Ever since I had seen Kaylin and Sienna's pitiful state on the street, a complex mix of pity and a need for closure had compelled me to extend extra support to the area. It wasn't for them, it was for the children who had to grow up in their shadow. "When does the camp start?" I asked, flipping through the pages. "Next Monday," May replied cheerfully. "The children are so excited. Most have never been to Crestfall City before." I rubbed my 7 months pregnant belly, feeling like I was carrying a giant watermelon. Julian was more nervous than ever, his protective instincts in overdrive. The phone rang. "Alara." Julian's voice was warm but firm. "I'm on my way to pick you up. Don't forget your prenatal checkup today." I couldn't help but laugh. As if I could forget. "You've only reminded me 3 times this morning." After hanging up, I gazed out at the bustling cityscape. In just 2 years we had built an empire. It was the very path Kaylin had taken in my first life, but this time, it was paved with partnership and love, not deceit and ambition. A week later, the charity summer camp officially opened. My condition prevented me from attending, but Julian brought back a video recording. "This kid was amazing," Julian said that evening, pointing at the television screen in our living room. The video showed a skinny, nervous boy standing on a stage, clutching the hem of his shirt. "My name is Wang Xiaoming," the boy stammered. "I'm from Xinghua Town Elementary." I listened idly, my mind on the nursery preparations, until he said something that made my heart jolt. "There's a man in our town who runs a repair shop," the boy continued, his voice gaining a little confidence. "His son has cerebral palsy. He was supposed to come to this camp too, but his dad refused when he found out it was organized by the Thorn Group. Said, no way." I sat upright, my hand freezing on my teacup. Julian's smile faded. He reached over and took my hand. Later, the boy's voice dropped to a whisper. "That kid broke some of the new DVD players in the shop. His dad nearly strangled him with an electric cord." The video shook slightly as if the cameraman had been startled. "His mom tried to stop him and he stabbed her. Over 10 times. A heavy, suffocating silence filled our elegant living room. The only sound was the quiet hum of the air conditioner. "And while he was stabbing her," the boy said, looking up with wide, traumatized eyes, "he kept yelling about being the richest man in Crestfall, how he was going to start over or something." He swallowed. "The police told us he was a madman. He's already been executed." The video ended. The room was utterly still. It was several moments before I could speak. "It was Kaylin," I said, my voice quiet and hollow. Julian squeezed my hand. "I looked into it after I saw the tape. After we ran into them that day, Sienna kept pushing him to marry her. He refused. They fought constantly." He sighed. The downward spiral was fast. In my mind, I saw it. Kaylin's raving, Sienna's shrieking. The 2 people who had conspired to destroy my life in another world, now destroying each other in this one. "And the child?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "No relatives would take him. He was sent to a state welfare home," Julian said softly. "Alara, don't dwell on it. It's not good for you or the babies." I nodded, but my thoughts were spiraling. What if Kaylin hadn't been reborn? What if our paths had never crossed again? Would he have still succumbed to this darkness? The questions were pointless. His choices in both lifetimes were his own. "He deserved it," I said aloud, the words cold and final. Julian blinked in surprise, then pulled me into his arms. You're right, he said, his voice firm. He did. He did. In our past life he had driven me and our children to ruin for Sienna and her son. In this life he had paid with his own life for them. It was a brutal, karmic symmetry. There was no joy in it, only a profound, chilling sense of closure. 2 months later, in the best hospital in Crestfall, I gave birth to 2 healthy boys and a beautiful girl. The delivery was smooth, thanks to Julian's relentless insistence on the best care possible. From outside the delivery room I heard him, the stoic, dependable Julian Thorne, sobbing like a child. The doctors later told me he cried so much they had to reassure him repeatedly that both mother and babies were perfectly healthy. Elara, look, Julian said later, his eyes still red-rimmed as he held our daughter with a tenderness that made my heart ache. She has your eyes. I gave him a tired, blissful smile. As I looked at the 3 tiny, perfect lives in their incubators, the last remnants of my past life melted away. In my first life, Kaylin hadn't even been present for the birth of our son. But Julian changed diapers, woke for late-night feedings, and would sit for hours just watching them sleep. By the way, Julian said one evening as we sat together in the nursery, I've made a decision. What is it? I asked, leaning my head against his shoulder. I've had a vasectomy. I stared at him, shocked. What? Seriously? The doctor said carrying triplets was incredibly hard on your body, he said, his voice gentle but firm. We have 3 perfect, healthy children. We don't need any more. Your health is all that matters to me. I was speechless. In this era, with immense pressure on sons to carry on the family name, Julian, the scion of a wealthy, prominent family, had voluntarily chosen sterilization for my sake. He saw my expression and grinned, leaning down to kiss me. We're just following the national family planning policy, right? He teased softly. Besides, these 3 are more than enough for me. Tears welled in my eyes. The difference between the 2 men was the difference between night and day. One had sacrificed me for his desires. The other sacrificed his own potential desires for me. Before we knew it, the babies were 100 days old. The Thorne ancestral home was decorated lavishly for the celebration. It was a grand affair, the city's elite in attendance. I wore a custom-made cheongsam and held my daughter in my arms, greeting guests. Julian stood beaming beside me, holding a son in each arm as if they were the most precious treasures in the world. Elara, my mother whispered, pulling me aside. Your father set up an education fund for each of the children. 20,000 yuan each. I laughed through happy tears. Mom, we're not exactly short on money. That's not the point, she chided, her eyes shining. This is from their grandparents. It's their love. Just then Julian called out, Elara, Mom, the cake is here. The banquet hall was filled with the sound of clinking glasses and joyful laughter. I stood beside Julian, looking out at the room full of loved ones. And suddenly, I remembered another banquet from my previous life. The one Kaylin threw after becoming the richest man in Crestfall. I had been a shadow in the corner, watching him parade Sienna around, the 2 of them basking in a stolen spotlight. But now I was the one everyone looked upon with admiration and respect. I had a husband who adored me, 3 beautiful children, and a thriving business I had built with my own mind and the support of my family. What are you thinking about? Julian asked gently, squeezing my hand. I looked up at him, at his kind, steady eyes, and felt a wave of pure, unadulterated happiness. I'm thinking about how lucky I am. He laughed softly, then leaned in close, his breath warm against my ear. No, my love. I'm the lucky one. I finally got to wait for you. And in that moment, surrounded by love and light, I knew it was true. The long, bitter winter of my first life was finally over. I had stepped into the warm, enduring sunshine of my second chance. The echoes of the past had faded to silence, and the future, bright and full of promise, was ours. The end.